I've only smoked like 8 cigars in my life, and I think 5 of them were bought by Bill Burr.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raylan Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
I'm still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too. Hi, I'm Raylan Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raylan Nelson Band.
Welcome back to another episode of Music is Funny. Hey, if you didn't catch our 420 extravaganza show yesterday at 4:20 p.m. Central, you can still watch it for a week on Veeps.com. So,
yeah, go check it out. I quite enjoyed it. It was fun.
And we have shows May 13th and 14th in Woodstock, Georgia, May 28th in Memphis, and June 26th in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. So if you're anywhere near Tennessee or Georgia, come see us live.
Yeah, you can go to RaylanNelsonBand.com and find out all that kind of information. Anyway, this week we got a new comedian on. He was a coach's son, a basketball player as a youngster, and I think he went up through college.
Yeah, he started off as a sports anchor before he transitioned into comedy.
Yeah, he told us that he was a little maybe too smart-assy on the sports side, that sort of had to transition into the stand-up world, which it was a good choice for him for sure.
Yeah, he's actually toured all over the world.
Yeah, he was talking about how he and Ari Shafir had made a pact that they would try and hit a brand new country every year.
Yeah.
And up to COVID, I think they stuck to that. So that was interesting. It's been all over TV, you know, Letterman, Craig Ferguson, done a bunch of specials, written with other comedians.
Tom Papa.
Yeah.
We have an ongoing argument now about coffee ice cream versus orange creamsicle vodka
Infused
ice cream. And we get into that in the podcast. Without further ado, Paul Morrissey.
My mom's like 74, and she runs a New York City Marathon every year. She's amazing.
Wow.
Like she quit smoking when she was 40. She's just run since then. And she runs for like all these charities, all this kind of stuff. So she's running on the side of the road. There's this turtle who was like stuck in the middle of the road. So she like kind of like turned it, and then and it got back to across to wherever it was going, to the pond. And I put the music from the Fray, How to Save a Life. You know, I made it like very dramatic. And everyone was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I think your aunt loved it too. And then some guy was like, "It's not a turtle, it's a tortoise." And then it was like people start arguing about you know, whether it is or not. And then that became the whole thing. Not that it was cool that my mom did this, or that it was kind of funny that I made this video. It was just like, is it a turtle or tortoise? But apparently it is, if it has like the real feet, like that can walk.
Right.
I think that means it's a turtle, and then tortoise has the one that it's almost like fins.
Yeah,
like
I went to Google and it says turtles can be aquatic, semi-aquatic, or mostly terrestrial. Tortoises are turtles that live on land and aren't equipped for water.
Tortoises, okay. So I think this was a turtle because it was having trouble, like it really couldn't walk on land, and my mom really did help it. So that's how I kind of came back at that. But it was funny. That was like a week of the pandemic was just tortoise turtle.
Well, at least you didn't find a tortoise and throw it in the water to save him.
Yeah.
So, what kind of music?
Well, let me know.
Yeah, what kind of music fan were you?
Other than the Fray, How to Save a Life.
Yeah, were you into it at all? A casual listener, you know?
Well, the tough thing. So I grew up in a real small town in upstate New York, like up near like Ithaca, is kind of a cool little place because of the colleges and stuff. And they have like I don't know if you guys have played there. You probably have, right? Have you been upstate at all? Like
not upstate.
That far.
I mean, it's just like these, you know, it's like, you know, Woodstock is just like a place that like everyone from 50 miles around just met. Like that's kind of what upstate is. And you know, there wasn't like, it was just all top 20 radio. You couldn't really get anything like cool, you know, like if you had your older brother was kind of like your link to anything cool. or kind of music. And my brother was like into Rush and
Okay.
like all that kind of stuff. So I didn't get anything like super like and as I grew up, well, here's a funny story. So when you grow up in a small town, which I don't know if you guys did, uh,
I grew up here in
you
Nashville. You grew up here.
okay,
Yeah.
but that's like a cool like small town is like we're kind of like Hicks. So then it's like okay, you guys listen to country music, blah blah blah. So you kind of like fight against that. And I remember this distinctly. We were like 18 and we went to there's a place called Mansfield University. It's like a college like in Pennsylvania, and one of our friends was going there. So we like went down there. I think we might have been like seniors in high school or something, and we had a couple of beers at the dorm, and they're like, "Hey, there's a concert. It's like Johnny Cash and Family or something, some country crap." And we go there, and all of us became like the biggest Johnny Cash fans. Like we all bought the CDs like immediately and all that kind of stuff. And so we quickly realized like the difference between like I love the outlaw country, like that's what I do. My parents love Willie Nelson. They've seen him like 3 times in the family. I've seen him here. I actually saw the last time I think Christofferson sang. He sang a song with him at one of the places in LA, like in must have been 2019. They brought him out for like a song, and I don't think half the people knew who Chris Christopherson was.
What?
And even the people next to me, I'm like, do you guys realize how crazy this is that he's coming out to like sing a song?
Right.
And they even brought him to do like On the Road again, and it was so cool for me to see.
What was one of your parents' favorite Papa Willie songs?
Oh man. My dad loves what's the train one? Man. City of New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
Angel flying too close to the ground, all kinds. Yeah. I love it. I love everything about him. I read the book. I was somewhere like in Europe and I listened to the audiobook.
Okay.
And he had a crazy life. Like insane, and it's so interesting, like all the family stuff and just the different jobs. Like he was like a radio guy, and like recording his own stuff, and it was like because I think a lot of people see him as like a kind of a stoner and a laid back dude, but he was like a hustler. Like he made it happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's still hustling. I mean, he'd be on the road right now if he could be,
Speaking of different jobs, you like you didn't start off as a comedian or a stand-up. You had a different kind of route to. Did you want to be a stand-up early on, or is that something you found after you? We'll get into your you started on sports.
Yeah,
doing like local sports, right?
Yeah, it was a weird thing, and I know I didn't answer your question at all because I'm like a huge music fan now. The beginning of that question was basically like I was exposed to nothing, and then moving to like New York City and LA, I get to see like all the best people because everyone comes to town, and it's like the greatest thing ever. But yeah, as far as growing up in this small town, my dad was he was the gym teacher. So I got babysat in a basketball court basically, and I was only like 5 feet tall and very small. But
So
I just
you were a gym rat.
Basically, yeah, that's where you get babysat. So I guess you can learn to either hate that or go the other way where you love it. And so I loved it, but I wasn't very good. And then I just kind of kept practicing, and I grew a couple inches. I'm like 5'9.5" now. But I ended up, playing in college and having a pretty good high school career, and it was kind of my ticket out of the little town, and I could kind of go to a bunch of colleges I never would have been able to go to if I didn't play basketball. So, but yeah, so my thing was like, and I wasn't like, and Raylan's looking at me like, oh, this guy's like a jock. No, I'm not. I'm so not. Like, I'm more of a misfit in sports than I am in comedy. Like, I don't really fit anywhere. I'm kind of like a strange thing. So, like, I was just very good at basketball because of all the time that I put into it. And so, so I played, and, the thing was like, oh, I'll play in the NBA. And then you realize that's not going to happen. So at the end of college, it was like, well, I could coach. I could, I could play like in Ireland, like overseas, where it's like everybody else who looks like me, or I could play for the Washington Generals, which is the team that gets beat by the Globetrotters every game. So I had a couple of friends that actually did that, but I was like, I don't want to lose on purpose. So my other thing was like ESPN was getting so big. I was like, oh, I could, talk about sports. That would be a cool job. So I ended up like interning at the TV station that I played in the market. They covered our college games, and then I ended up working in Phoenix, and then I was an on-air like sports anchor in like Northern California, in Chico, California. That's where I ended up. And so, and I wasn't like a TV person. I had no idea how to be on TV. I never performed. I just knew sports. So one night I went into a comedy club, and the lady that was there was like, "Hey, you're really funny on TV. You should come do the show." And I was like, "Oh, I have no idea what to do." And she's like, "Well, I'll help you. We do like this little workshop thing, and we do Monday nights." And so I ended up doing stand-up through trying to get better on this TV news, And the funny part was, not only was I the sports anchor, I had to do news. So they would be like, "Oh, there's a murder at this place. So Paul, go down there and take video." And I was like, "I'm not going anywhere near that place. Somebody just got murdered there." So I was like, "I'm going to the mall and interview people about what they want for Christmas." So I was like doing Daily Show kind of stories at a real TV station. So they basically like promoted me just to sports anchor, so I wouldn't do any of this news stuff anymore.
So how did the management take the kind of humorous approach to your job?
I have a news director that loved it. He still loves all my comedy, but the guy who owned the station hated my guts, and he still does, I think. But I have some great tape. And some cool, I did a lot of fun things on the air that I can't believe I got away with. And it was fun. And the weird story about that, so the woman that was running the club, she ended up being the head writer on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Her name's Karen Anderson. She's like won a ton of Emmys and works for like every like Wanda Sykes, every great comedian. She's worked on their show, and she's still an amazing writer here, and we're still friends. That was like a huge influence, and obviously, I'm thankful to her. So basically, I quit my TV job and moved to New York City to like chase comedy. And,
so when you did that coming from a small town, what did your parents think? Did they think you were crazy or supportive or?
Well, I think my parents they're super cool. They want all of us to be happy. Like my brother's like a cancer, like he's literally like the cure for cancer. He's a genius. He went to Columbia. He's
I thought you meant
still
the
like a
astrological sign. He was a Cancer.
Oh no.
I'm like, I'm a Cancer too. All right, go ahead.
But the weird thing is, like, I used to win at Operation when we played as a kid. The one where you take out the bones, and so I think still skill wise, maybe I would have been a better doctor, but he's definitely smarter. So it was kind of like, he is a doctor. My sister was a teacher and kind of like a deadhead for a little while.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm somewhere in the middle. So I think it was kind of like, I seemed kind of like if I found something I liked, I was focused on it. So they're like, okay, he'll do this. And the other thing was I got my master's in education at NYU while I was doing stand up. So that's how like kind of focused I was in New York City. So I was like going in class all day, doing shows every night. And, and it was a great time in New York City back then. Like Ed Helms ran the like Monday night comedy night. And I was a good friend of his. He always put me up on his show. Paul Scheer from the League. He was my improv teacher.
What year around is this?
It's like 2000s, early 2000s, and it was a really cool scene. Like Jim Gaffigan was just getting big, and like he saw me at a show and like took me on the road to like open for him for like a year or two at all these clubs, DC, Columbus, all over the place. So it was a lot of like great people helping me out. So I'm always thankful for that. And I try to be nice to all the comics. They're like, hey, how did you do that? Or how did you end up getting into that kind of thing? So
We've talked about that some with other comics, how I don't know if it's easier. It seems like for comedians to help other people out, if you have a position of stature, you can bring your buddy out on the road with you. It didn't seem to be as much red tape involved with the opening acts coming around. So, you guys seem to be a little more free to help your buddies out.
Well, I was curious with you guys, because you guys do these big tours and stuff too. Is it all like managers and promoters, or is it like, how does that work out?
Well, it really kind of depends. We book most of the stuff.
Yeah, we do most of it ourselves. We don't have a label
But
or anything.
the major tours and stuff, they don't have any say-so on who the opening bands are or anything like that. It really depends on where you're setting. If you're putting out your own records or if you're an independent artist, you got a better shot. But
we've gotten lucky, but just because we've gotten the early slot on some of the big shows.
Yeah.
Just because whoever was booking it liked our band. That's been
right.
Cool.
And there is some bands like Driving and Crying. When we were first starting out, they would help. There are bands around that have
Driving and Crying,
have that
Todd
kind of control.
Snyder's band, Hardworking American.
Oh yeah, he's funny too. I love his stuff.
Yeah, he's all right.
So it happens a bit in music, but I think maybe it's a little more difficult for us to take buddies out.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like, when Gaffigan got, because I worked with him after, when it was like Giant Theater, I worked with him. The first one was this West Wendover. Have you ever been there? It's like it's on the border of Utah and Nevada, like near Reno.
No.
And like where everyone from Salt Lake City like goes to gamble, they have to like drive the casino is literally like on the state line.
We have a racetrack like that here in Kentucky. You drive 70 miles up the road so you can go gamble.
Oh, yeah. So it's like that. And it was a Sunday. We're doing 2 shows. And this place is like, 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I'm like, I'm the only one in this hotel, Jim. Like, nobody's coming to this place. Right. And we get there. It's completely sold out for 2 shows on a Sunday. And I was just like, man, this is amazing. Because this is a guy, we were doing this. We did this Ed show. We had 4 people at the show at the Boston Comedy Club, and I'm really happy for all those guys. And so, hopefully like I'm a fun guy on the road and I'm a good hang and I'm not like too much work. I think that's 90% of it is just to be somebody who's fun to be around and funny. Yeah. So like not like actually how I ended up talking to Amy is so I started doing a radio show with Tom Papa, and I worked on like his CBS pilot, and I worked on like his last couple specials. And so he made the shift from like going from comedy clubs to these small theaters, and there's, you guys probably know there's these beautiful theaters in like every city that like you never really go to. They're like 400 or 500 seats, and it's like amazing to play these places. And so I think Amy and the Folk Uke opened for Arlo Guthrie, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, that's right. That was right before the pandemic, right?
Yeah. So like we were literally like doing all the same dates as they were. We were in Nashville. We were in our last 2 gigs were City Winery in Nashville. Yeah. And you guys probably remember wasn't there a tornado or a hurricane or something?
Yeah.
That was like that day or the next day.
Almost a year ago, because it was just a couple weeks ago was the anniversary.
I think it was a little over a year ago. Yeah.
It was like March 7th, 8th, because we did Nashville and then Philly, the Keswick Theater in Philly, and that was our last gig. We saw Paula Poundstone on the plane, and she said, "We're fucked." And then that was our last gig. It was crazy.
Yeah, and our 1-2 punch was the tornado, and then right when they're starting to form these benefit concerts to get everybody out from under, they just shut everything down. It's like, well, all right, nothing we can do now.
It was the weirdest thing too, because I flew in the night before and stayed at like a hotel right by the airport, and then I was going to go downtown, was it a tornado or a hurricane, or is it tornado?
Yeah.
Went right through downtown.
Right through downtown and through East Nashville.
So luckily I was like nowhere near it, and then like we still weren't sure if we were going to do the show. And then apparently it was really like cut and dry. Like everything here is destroyed and then everything here is okay.
Yeah.
And so
just a path from here. God, it went almost all the way to Cookeville.
Yeah.
So forever it stayed on the ground, but yeah.
It ruined a lot of our favorite spots in East Nashville too. Basement East was demolished, and just all the cute little restaurants around there. I don't even think that they've built back. Basement East just started again.
Yeah, they're working on it.
But yeah,
but that your place is okay, like your location.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
We were just fine.
Okay,
I'm north of town, in a little bitty town, north of Nashville in a little bitty town. JB's right in town, but he was fine.
Yeah, I slept right through it.
Okay, but you have but all the artifacts were okay in the museum.
Oh yeah,
yeah, they're standing. Everything's good.
For sure.
Everything's good.
Is that the full bus, or is that just a picture? I can't tell.
Yeah, this is our bus behind us that my grandpa lets us use, and he actually, I don't know if you see, he's actually here with us right now. He just got off the bus. Hey, no, it's a fake cardboard thing, but it looks really cool.
It's not cardboard. It's at least plywood.
I feel like that. Okay, yeah, it might be wood or drywall.
Well, why couldn't he just like store one of the buses there? I don't understand. You could do that and like write it off, right?
Yeah,
Wouldn't
you
that be
should
a way
probably talk him into that, and then maybe we could use it sometimes just to hang out in. Maybe.
So how many does he have? Has he got rid of all except for the number one now?
I think Lucas is using one. Paula uses one sometimes, maybe, and then the others are crew buses and his. So I think maybe he has one or two left over that he keeps Lucas's band, and he should be on here. That'd be cool.
Have you ever I'm also a huge fan of the band, like the Last Waltz, like that kind of era, and I'm really into that, and I love the history of all that kind of stuff. Like I'm gonna stay, like I wanted to record a special at Levon's little
in
the barn up there. Because Big Pink is still there. You can like rent Big Pink, where they like wrote all the songs and everything with Dylan. And but in Malibu, where I think Lucas recorded at Shangri-La, that's where they did a bunch of their albums.
Okay.
Bob Dylan's tour bus is still there, like outside. Like you can look at the satellite picture. I think in that David Letterman show, they have Jay-Z, and then for some reason they go with Rick Rubin to Shangri-La because Rick Rubin owns it now. And Lucas is like recording something, and they go out to like Dylan's bus, and they have all the recording equipment in the bus, so you can like record an album like on Dylan's tour bus, which is pretty cool. So
that is cool.
Be nice to have Rick Rubin's money, yeah.
Exactly, right? So that's my tip for the museum is get Willie's old bus before he buys the new one, and then turn it into a recording studio.
I'm going to pass along that advice, because that's not, I just mostly want to hang out on the bus, so when it's here.
Now, how did you so you start doing stand-up and get your foot in? Like, how did there's a funny story about you getting on Letterman for the first time, or about to get on. Can you maybe give us that one? Like the first time you were doing Letterman?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
how did that come about too?
Funny story.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but like, so when I start working the road, and I think you talked about this with Doug. So when you work as a comic, like there is kind of like a goal in mind, at least for me. It wasn't like I'm going to go to Sacramento and get drunk every night and then hopefully have some good shows. It was like, hey, I'm trying to come up with, I'm working on these jokes. And so I'm on tour for like this 6 weeks, and I want to have, a 5-minute thing that I can do on TV at the end of this. Like that was kind of my goal, was like, because everything you needed 5 minutes, you needed for a contest, for whatever. And I know you guys are fans of Segura. So Tom, I'm friends with, we were finalists in the Maxim's Real Men of Comedy, which doesn't fit me at all. But it was me, Adam Devine from Workaholics, who was also like a door guy at the Improv at the time, and a super cool guy, and Tom. And the winner got to like open for Joe Rogan on all these like tour dates. And that's how Tom ended up meeting Joe.
We should mention that Tom is another fantastic basketball player, as we found out recently.
Oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever seen.
I can only watch it once.
That's so horrible. I mean, we had because I got away from basketball completely for a long time, and then for some reason it was like a cool thing, like the Comedy Store, and a lot of people started playing like on Saturdays, and so it was just a bunch of comics started playing. So like Ari Shafir, Adam Devine, like all these guys. That's how I got to be friendly with Ari, and so we were on the basketball team there. So that was kind of a fun thing. So like none of these guys can play. So it was just kind of a fun social thing. But yeah, as soon as I saw Tom like try to shoot like a fadeaway, I was like, oh, he's gonna get hurt. I thought Bert was gonna get hurt.
I know, right?
I still do. Like, I used to
coming.
I worked with Bert on the road. I have pictures of him, and he's like, he looks like a young, like vibrant, and I can't believe like did he run a marathon? He looks
and I don't know if you catch their live shows, which I've caught every single one of them except for the Super Bowl one, but
they're live streams.
Live streams. Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
I haven't like followed them around like the dead and caught all their I didn't mean like that. Their live stream shows over the pandemic, and they did a tennis match against each other, and Bert's serve is amazing. But he kicked Tom's ass, who's been training with a trainer, and the guy was like, the only way Bert's going to beat you is if he has an amazing serve, and every single time just nailed the serve.
That's so funny.
I mean, he was like okay with everything else, but that serve, and Tom's just not a good server, so it was anyway.
But this is after the injury?
No, this was before. This was probably.
I was gonna say, because I mean, if Tom ends up able to play tennis or hold a tennis racket, that would be amazing. That's the worst injury I've ever heard in my life. So yeah, hopefully Tom is doing okay and never plays basketball again. I did send him a text. But yeah, so with comedy, it was like, especially in New York, it's like, do you have a great 5 minutes? And that's honestly how like, Gaffigan or somebody like that, or like, oh, this guy's really good. He can open for me or something like that. And that kind of is what gets you in. Cause that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do an hour at like a bar show, cause I've done all those too. I've done those gigs like Doug was talking about where there's nobody in there and they want you to perform just so if somebody walks by, they see that there's a show going on. And I'm like, don't you know that they're going to see that nobody's in there? So it must be horrible. Like what? That doesn't work.
Right.
I've done Mother of Twins conventions. That was a gig I did one time where it's all. Oh my goodness. Do you know about this?
No. Why wasn't I invited?
It sounds like a time.
So
I do know there's a Potato. It's like Parents of Twins and Triplets organization. I didn't know.
No, it's a thing, and you guys are train wrecks. You guys, like, you think about.
I was
thinking about, it's like, okay, there's a magician that went on before me, and it's all like like it's mothers of twins who haven't been away from the house in however many years, and so it was the drunkest audience I've ever played for. And so this guy, there was a magician open for me, which we kind of argued because it's like, I don't want to follow magic, there's gonna be glitter on the stage and cards and stuff. And then he's like I'm not closing in front of these people. And so he went on, and they like basically booed him off stage, and he's just like these people are terrible. Like, he was almost crying. And so I went up there, and because I'm thinking about, it's like, okay, this is all audience of women, so you kind of analyze your set list. Like, is this all like college beer drinking and sports jokes, and so I think it's fun to like do shows like that kind of analyze your material, but then you're like, okay, this works everywhere. These are the jokes that I like to do, Mm-hmm. So yeah, So that, I've done all those gigs, and then it was like, okay, when you move to New York or LA, you have to quote unquote pass at all these clubs. And basically when I got to New York, they're like, unless somebody dies or moves to LA, nobody's passing here. This is like, everyone was like, it was Greg Giraldo, Patrice O'Neal, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, Tom Papa, Jim Gaffigan, all the same people that are great now, Sarah Silverman, and so
They're like, we're full. We don't need any more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did like a lot of alternative shows, which I don't necessarily fit in either, but I like to play everywhere, you know, and it's not like a people pleasing thing. It's like, I'm a comedian. I got to be able to make people laugh, you know? So, but the kind of shortcut to that was like, you have a 5-minute set. If you get on TV and 5 million people see you, then you don't need the clubs. You know what I mean? Like you don't need, like people will ask for you, you know, like you can get booking. Like if you do Letterman or any of the late night shows, they used to be able to be like, oh yeah, we want you to come next week, or there's a corporate place that wants you. So that was kind of the shortcut for me, was like, okay, if I get on TV, that makes all of this easier, you know? So the road was kind of a process that way, which I think isn't that different for music? Because you guys were talking about, it's like you can work on your music by yourselves and then play, right? You can't really change it as you're on the road.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you guys, like, we can. I mean, you can change arrangements or whatever on the road, but we don't write in front of other people. You know, we don't sit down and go, I got an idea for a course or whatever, and do that in front of people to, you know, until we have it sort of fleshed out and happy with it, we don't present it.
No, I have a hard enough time getting my ideas out to him for us to, you know, I'm like, this is going to be
right.
or whatever.
And you guys, I mean, speaking into a mirror is not going to tell you whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
at least we get to sort of write it. You're rewriting and know that what you're presenting is not going to be the finished product the first time you put it out.
right. And then you put it in the added filter of like, what are you going to do on national TV? It's very different than this bar in St. Louis, or, you know what I mean? So
Right.
so when I'm at those clubs, I'm thinking the higher purpose of like, does this work in a bar and we'll get an applause break on TV? Like, that's what I want. Like, I'm aiming to like tighten these jokes up. And so that's what was so great about working, you know, with Gaffigan and guys that were already doing that, is I watched that process, and I watched how those guys, you know, Jim Gaffigan's Hot Pocket bit is 20 minutes long, but he does the best 2 minutes of it. You know what I mean? So you have to be able to like throw stuff out. So that's what, I mean, honestly, it feels like Saturday Night Live to me, because it's like, if you know that you're doing a late night spot, you're doing 5 minutes. So you really analyze, like, do I need this word? Do I need that word? Like, it really does put you to like the test of like, you're going to do this on TV. So you better like every part of this joke. And so for me, that was like a great process of like, you know, for a while I was doing the late show with Craig Ferguson like every 6 months. So like that was my purpose, was like, you know, work on this next 5 minutes. There was even, you know, and that's my advice to young comics, is like always have that a set ready to do for anybody. You know what I mean? Like if you get asked to go, you know, I opened for Weird Al Yankovic one time. And so it was like 8,000 families. And his roadie is like, if you swear in front of these kids, I'm going to tackle you on stage, you know? So you have to have like something ready for Weird Al. So that was like kind of exciting for me. So, you know, even that's turned into like international, where, you know, me and Ari Shafir we performed in Switzerland, and we did this thing where it's like, hey, I want everything to be this memorable. Let's perform in 5 new countries every year. Let's make like a pact. Yeah. So we've done that since like 2013, except for last year. You know, I performed in Iraq 2 years ago for like on 4th of July for the troops. I was in Kuwait. I did Hong Kong, Vietnam. You know, I'll go anywhere. It's like, if my memory foam mattress joke works in Vietnam, like how cool is that? You know?
Well, talking about that 5 minute thing, it almost sounds like a demo tape, you know, to get your foot in the door. But we should get back to the Letterman thing.
And I know that's like an old fashioned kind of thing, but I think, you know, especially when you see comedians now talk about doing the hour, it's like, I don't want to watch me do an hour. Like, you really think anybody's going to watch you do an hour when you don't know how to do 5 minutes? You know what I mean? That was kind of like the tester of it. It's like, if you kill on the Tonight Show and Letterman for 5 minutes, then they might give you an hour, but then that's doing 10 of those sets. So imagine like the process that you're putting yourself into. So anyway, so I done the Craig Ferguson show a bunch of times, and the Letterman booker for whatever reason told me, it's always a weird thing, but basically he was just like, you need to like own the stage and yell and like, basically be everything I'm not. Cause I always thought Letterman was about like the jokes. Like that's why I love Hedberg, Gaffigan. They just had great jokes and they didn't have to be yelling at the audience or like, doing like overly like physical material, it was just like great jokes. So when that guy got fired, the producers took over. And funny story is like another kind of feeling upwards thing. I always loved Conan, and I wanted to do Conan, and I had done like a show with Andy at like Largo, and always liked Conan. And the booker, I had this like great set, and I'd already done a bunch of TV, and he was like, pass. And he was like, no. And I was like, almost thought he was joking. He was like so rude. It wasn't like, hey, we don't have anything now. It was just very, very rude. And that's not to say, but for whatever reason, it really kind of ticked me off. And so I just made the set better. And then I was going to send it back to him. And then I heard about the Letterman. So I just was like, oh, I'll send this to Letterman because it's really good now. And then they literally like that morning, like it was one of those, like I'm a night owl. So I sent it like 2 or 3 in the morning here. And then like, I just went up to go to the bathroom at like 5 or 6 in the morning. And they're like, hey, this looks great. There was like one joke that they wanted me like replace. And then it was like, hey, everything. So it's like, because of the Conan thing, like I got to do Letterman, which was my dream anyway. So, I don't know if you guys were like fans. What were you fans of like growing up?
Basically Letterman. I liked the SNL. I'm older than she is, but those, the glory years of SNL and things like that. But that was back when there wasn't a whole lot of choice,
Right.
Cable was around, but we were in our 20s and couldn't afford cable TV at our bachelor pads. Like now everybody's got cable, but back then it was 2, 4, and 5 and 17 if you could get the rabbit ears to work.
No, now nobody has cable and everybody's streaming.
Well, that's true. Yeah, we've gone even past that. But
yeah, that's the tough thing is like I was growing up, Letterman was on at 12:30, so he's like jumping into a pool of water with like a suit made out of Alka-Seltzer.
Yep.
And I was like, I want to be on that show. And so I got tickets. Me and my friend Willie, we skipped high school. Yep.
No, we're like,
we drove to New York City, which was like three hours each way, and went to a taping, and it was amazing. And it was like, man, I want to be a part of this somehow. And it's whatever it was, 15 something years later, I end up on the show. And so, I got to New York a week early. You go to every comedy club. Remember all the clubs that you didn't pass at? You're doing Letterman now. So, hey, whenever you want a spot, you can do it. Blah, blah. That's where I met Mark Norman, I think, was your other guest.
Talked to him.
He was doing his first Conan maybe or something. So we were basically like doing our sets, like running them the same week, like over. So that's how we kind of became friendly. And then, so I get to the, and you also have to get a suit. That's one thing, I never really wore a suit before Letterman, but it's like old fashioned show business. Like you got to wear a suit. And then I don't know if this happened. Basically, also the other thing was no microphone, which is very weird. You just get a lavalier, which makes sense, but I've never performed without a microphone in my life. So, so I had to like ask questions about, like, I didn't want to look like a TED Talk or anything like that. So there's like, I got advice from, there's a great comedian, Brian Regan. His brother, Dennis, is also a very funny comic. And he gave me this advice that Brian gave him was to like, this is another story you're going to hate, Raylan, because it's a sports analogy.
It's okay. I'll tune out
basically, you're a pitcher. And pretend you're a pitcher, and then if you're talking, always come back to your glove. So like, always come back to the same place. Instead of like having a hand in a pocket or having something dangle. Like if you talk this way, kind of come back to the middle to the start, and then at least you're kind of balanced. But if you just start like leaning one way, then it always looks weird, or people start twiddling their thumbs or something like that. So that was a good way to like keep my hands from not looking awkward, I guess. So and then the other cool thing is you get to pick Paul Shafir's band, you get to pick the song that you come out to, which is like a pretty
cool.
Which one's
amazing thing. Well, that's a thought process because you're only going like 10 seconds, right? So it's got to be something that starts strong. And then also something that like, it's always funny, like somebody comes out to like AC/DC or something, and then it's like, then you just start talking, and it's like, you
get them a little too fired up.
You just followed like cannons blasting, and then you're just like, hey, how you doing? So I always think that's funny when like these TV specials start with like explosions, and then it's just like, hey, so how you guys doing?
So what did you choose? What song did you pick?
So my thing was, I'm a big the history of Warren Zevon on Letterman is a big thing with me.
Yep.
Because when he was dying, he basically talked about it for an hour on the show, and Dave let him play whatever he wanted. And so I picked Lawyers, Guns, and Money because it's like just a great opening and great, wanted to hear Paul's band play it. And so that's what I came up with. But yeah, that was equally like a cool part because I was like, you go through your whole like history because you want to like, I want people to like get the message of this song or something like that. And you kind of overthink it. What would you guys pick?
Oh God, I have no idea.
I had to sit and think. Probably one of mine.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. You get paid, right? Because they're using the rights, so that's why.
I really like the beginning of About That. I think I would use that one. Just
of ours?
Yeah. It's our song About That. Just go check that out. I had a question for you.
Didn't you? Did you get bumped? Well,
go ahead.
Continuing the story, did you get on the first? Did I read somewhere where you got bumped for your first Letterman, and actually got?
Yeah. So basically, so I'm on the show. I'm backstage. Like I've been there in New York for a week, prepping all this stuff, and I forget who. Oh, it was First Aid Kit. Do you know this band? I think they're girls from Sweden or something, but they're kind of like folk a little bit. But they're both like beautiful, like 6'5", like beautiful hair, like they're like supermodels that play music. It's ridiculous. And he said that like, yeah, neat.
I just love that so much. Yay.
They are pretty good though. Like they had like a hit.
So happy. That's our competition. Love it.
And also I only say that with a little bit of a jealousy because I am also being on TV, so I want them to make me look the best. But the costume designers clearly wanted to spend like 4 hours with these girls because it was like way more fun. So like
it's fun dressing people.
I was like, hey, I need my hair done, and the guy just like takes mousse and just like hits it and pulls it forward, so I just look like Laurel and Hardy or something. So Regis Philbin, the late Regis Philbin, was on, and it was just talking, and then all of a sudden I see like the producers from the side, and they just looked like someone was like dying or something, and they waved me over and like, hey, we're sorry, we're gonna have to reschedule you. And then I was like, oh, okay. I thought somebody was like sick or something, it didn't really hit me. And then Letterman announced his retirement, so they didn't give me like an actual date, so I was worried that I was like never gonna do it. And so thankfully they did schedule like a month later, and I think I ended up being the last comedian to debut. So
I was about to say, because they had a bunch of regulars blowing through that whole last.
Well, it was every famous person. Norm Macdonald was the last comic, so we've talked about that because I'm a big Norm fan, and he thought it was really cool that I was like the last guy to debut or something. He's like, that should be your thing. But yeah. So the second time I went, so basically the cool thing was, all the mystique is kind of like, it's still there, but it's away from you a little bit because you've done the travel, you've run through the set, all that kind of stuff. You did everything but the show. Right. So the next time I went, I was just so much more comfortable. And, my parents came. It was so much fun. Janelle Monáe shared the dressing room with me, which is pretty cool. We almost traded jackets because she always wears cool stuff. But yeah, when I did the show, it was like, kind of knocked it out of the park, and it was a big deal, for my career, and it was like kind of the way that I wanted it to be. So like all that waiting and all that kind of stuff was like a dream come true. And that's really like the only thing I ever wanted to do in stand-up was Letterman. So I'm still kind of struggling for like the next thing I want to do. Like I love comedy and I love, coming up with new jokes and I love that whole thing. But now it's just like I don't have like a thing that I definitely need to do. It's just a little more relaxed, I guess.
Well, that's cool. And it's weird that like you were talking about, you get the first 5 minutes to catering to TV shows and things. You need that when you come up contests and whatever. But I would think now the late night talk shows probably don't carry as much weight as they did when you were doing it. I'm just speaking for me. I don't ever watch them. If I want to see 5 minutes of a comedian, there's plenty on YouTube.
I go to YouTube.
You can just go find. So
yeah.
Yeah, I just searched you up on YouTube is what I did.
But it's like they used to do like the 5 minutes to get on TV, and then maybe, a 30-minute special would be the next thing on Comedy Central. Then you do your hour. But now with like Netflix and things like that, it seems like people are just, is there a spot for people to do 5 minutes, or is it you just jump into the deep end and throw out an hour? Or that's
trying to go viral. Are you just like trying to pick out ways to go viral?
No. I mean, that's the thing is I'm going to get destroyed for like saying the 5 minute thing because it is like an old man thing to say. But
would it make just sense with the system that was set up? There was,
But for me, it's more palatable. Like to say that you're going to do an hour, like what like I did hear of like a famous comedian who was like just going to clubs and doing 2 hours a night of terrible shows. And his thought process was like, well, I'm going to do an hour. So eventually that 2 hours will be a good hour. And I'm just like, yeah, but you're putting these people through torture. Like you're not being funny. Like I think my process is building like funny on top of funny instead of like having this big, 10 stories that I want to whittle down to like their essence, I guess. Cause by then I would be definitely sick of it. You know what I mean? At least if you're like coming up with different jokes. And I'm more, I do have stories, but I am more like kind of like short attention span, so like when you guys were talking about Hedberg's jokes, it's like I like the fact that like a joke I did on TV 15 years ago people still like, like I do this nutritionist joke and people still like hearing it. It's not dated and it doesn't, so it's not like I want to be known for a guy with old jokes, but I like that somebody can like listen to something from a long time ago and it's not like, oh, remember when George Bush was president? It's like, no, that doesn't
right.
Yeah, that's
doesn't
interesting.
work,
You have kind of timeless jokes, did you hear his egg one? That was really good. I thought you'd like that one because he hates eggs.
Well, that's what I mean. You can just talk about food for an hour
that's gonna go over forever. Everyone's
or sleep. I talk a ton about sleep. Or not sleeping enough, and is, as funny as it seems, people are, I talk about how much I hate soup, and that seems to be like a fire button issue with most people for some reason. So, even when I went to Vietnam, people were just like very fired up about, how do you not like soup? It's great, or Thailand, it really is like amazing to me that I can do, a joke that I came up with in my in my living room and do it in Switzerland. That's kind of crazy to me.
When you come up with your 5 minutes, I know we keep going back to this 5 minute thing and I'm sorry, but I'm just curious. Do you set a timer for 5 minutes and see if it's right? Is it that particular of the 5 minutes?
Here's an interesting thing. Another wrinkle to this story is that when I did the sports segment on the news, it was 4 minutes and 50 seconds. And it's this big studio, and basically like I have that time in my head now. I know because you're on live TV, and that was honestly that was my first improv class because you're supposed to show highlights of a baseball game and it's just black screen. You got to fill 30 seconds with something instead of saying how much you hate all the people that are working in the back. Like you got to figure out it was a dark night in Calgary. You got to do something funny, and so that was like my kind of like improv experience of just like rolling with it. You know what I mean? So by the time I got to do TV, the TV spot was 5 minutes. So I knew that time like inherently in my head. When I got to the TV studio, exact same lighting, same desk that I had with TV news even, except I was standing up. So all of that was not like, that's the nerve-wracking part for most comedians, is like being in the studio with all the lights and the cameras. Like I was so used to that already. So I think I really had like all of these jobs that I had before comedy, like led to it perfectly, the public speaking part, the, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if there's a lot of people that can say they went from TV into comedy like that, like on a, big TV stars going into comedy, but somebody working their way up that starts in TV and then ends up in comedy. That would be some valuable experience when it came time to go down and do that.
David Letterman was a weatherman.
That's true. That's true.
And he got fired for saying there's going to be hail the size of canned hams in Muncie, Indiana. That's what he got fired for.
Wow. Times have changed. I don't know. That might piss some people off now. You'd probably get canceled for that now too.
Yes. And then, but the first, my first show was the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, which was like a CBS, like 12:30 show.
Yeah.
And I got that because Louis C.K. was filming Lucky Louie and had to cancel last minute. So I got to fill in. So that's my other thing for people, is like always be ready to go. And after I did it, I think the second or third time I did it, like Jenny McCarthy like fell down the stairs or something. And so like I literally got called like at 1:00 to do the show at 3:30. And like I never practiced the set. I just had this set that I kind of had. And luckily, that's another thing about not staying out late night drinking and just doing nothing when you're bored. Because like if you get a call to be on TV the next day, I think that was also a signal to me too. So yeah, always be ready. That was my thing. So yeah, thankfully, I stacked up 4 or 5 of those appearances, and people kind of knew me, or they could at least look me up, instead of having a tape from some dingy comedy club with glasses smacking. You have like a show from a network, TV show like that. You can look like, oh, okay, you're a real comedian. That's basically what it was.
Yeah. I wonder if that's even a path now through the late night TV shows. It's like you had the late night shows where, well, before cable, you had there 3 channels. And if you got on one of those on Johnny Carson or whatever, you were going to get seen by a lot of people.
Yeah.
By the time cable came around with Ferguson, it kind of spread out more. I don't know if it's kind of going away that people are going there for comedy because of the internet.
It's just different. Yeah, it's just different. Like Joe Rogan has more.
I was just about to say
viewers than
most
like late night people. Yeah, so it's still like you got to do that.
But are there as many of those opportunities even now? I mean, I'm sure there are podcasts that you can go on that will lift your profile. But are there any other than that one that literally you go on and then the next day you're selling twice as many tickets?
Well, I mean, my thing I do, I've co-hosted, a podcast with Artie Lang.
Right.
I co-hosted one with Tom Papa. Yep. All that is like tons of fun. And I think I'm pretty good because I do have a little broadcasting background. So I kind of edit myself a lot too, and I don't try to take over the room. I like let it breathe a little bit. So I like doing those kind of things. But still, ultimately, like I want somebody to be like, I like that you guys can look me up and find a joke that you like that I did, or you know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't look like I filmed it in my bedroom, or you know what I mean? It's like, right. Oh, you were on Letterman. Like I've had like cab drivers, say that, or you get surprised, like, oh, you're like a real comedian. And
well, I think it still holds that cachet, even if people don't watch it. You know what I mean? It's funny. You just say that, and people are like, wow, you were on Letterman. When's the last time you watched Letterman? Oh, it's been years. Well, not Letterman now, but Tonight Show or whatever the late night TV shows are. Yeah. But it's still, I think, with a lot of people, just the fact of being on TV somewhere, it's probably going to...
TV makes a big difference for some reason.
Still does. Like, not as much as it used to, but...
Yeah. Just the process of it too, and I like that. I have a friend who does stand up at the Grand Ole Opry, and I was like, I'd love to like try to do that sometime, like or Carnegie Hall. Like I love like doing these kind of like these
He'd be
strange.
Great on the Grand Ole Opry. He'd be great.
Think? Yeah. Have you seen stand up there? I've never.
Know that Dusty Slay does, and I've
right, yeah.
I've seen his stand up, and he's great.
Jerry Clower.
He kind of
I got to go back, but Jerry Clower was amazing in the Opry.
yeah. The smell.
And that's my whole thing is like, I want to do these places without like looking like I'm trying to fit in. Like I want to be able to like do just my stuff, like
Right.
that's the way I am Stanhope a little bit. Cause I think Doug is so good he's a great writer and he almost does these horrible places just for the stories. You know what I mean?
That's why
I don't think he's like, I don't think he's as into the stand-up part because he's just such a great writer and he loves telling stories and he wants to have more stories. Obviously, that's why you surround yourself with all these kind of like, eccentric people.
Mhm.
So my thing is like if I'm gonna go on the road, I want to like make it count. So I want to have a process of, I don't want it to just be like a mess around thing. I know some people use it as like an escape, but I think I don't know if you ever heard Dave Grohl talk about touring, like how the tour is too long. So like he said, when they first get out there and they're playing their new songs, they're excited just about the show and they're wired. And then like a month in, they'll start like drinking after the show because they're like kind of relaxed. And then the month later, they start drinking during the show. And then when they start drinking before the show, that's when they know that the tour should be over because they're just bored of playing the songs. Right. And I think that's what stand-up is. Like it's got to be part of a process. You can't just stay out there forever or else it'll eat you alive. You know what I mean? People just kind of dive into, if you only just have to show up someplace for an hour a night, you can do a lot of horrible things to yourself in the meantime, so
I was just about to ask that. How, like, when we're on the road, we don't have a whole lot of, all our free time is taken up with driving, basically. We wake up, maybe a couple hours, climb back in the van and take off. And, most of the day is driving. You get there, sound check, blah, blah, blah. You guys don't have to carry around as much. I don't even know if you sound check. I assume you do, but maybe it's not that big a deal. But what do you do to kill time? Because you guys do 3 or 4 dates in the same city. And I wouldn't imagine once you land, there's a whole lot professionally that you have to do other than do the gig, maybe some radio, but it's got to be a lot of spare time that we don't have.
There's no spare time. And the funny thing is that the comedian sound check is the saddest thing ever. It's like the funniest thing. It makes you feel like such a cheat as like a performer. To even that's the thing, even to go to these places and just see all the stuff that they could be doing with all these different sets and microphones and lighting. And then they just take everything off the stage and like put a stool. And you can tell like all these guys just have the night off when the comedians are there. Like all the stage hands and everybody that's usually sound check and, guitar people, they don't have to do anything. So they just, it does feel like a real, like, should I be doing something? Like, should I?
Right.
It really is weird. But to that point, like I've always like Gaffigan is a super hard worker. Tom Papa is one of the hardest working people ever. And his kind of like, mentor was Seinfeld, who also is like one of the hardest working guys ever, even now. And those guys are really focused. And so like, I did come from just like working the club to club weeks where it's like, oh yeah, you can just mess around. But then you see the guys that are successful and they're like, oh, they're making this count. Like they're going out on the road with a focus. And that's what I want to do because I don't want to, I don't want to be just struggling and going to clubs where nobody knows who I am and trying to win people over. So to your question, so with Tom Papa, we're doing these theaters. So it's like, okay, you're airport 4 a.m., get to the place, maybe have like, find, we worked on a food show. So we always find like some great place to eat wherever we are. Then you go do that sound check, go over your stuff, do the show. And then, even when we were in Nashville, we were at the winery. So we hung out for a little bit. But then airport, 4 a.m., flew to Philly the next day. Same thing, maybe grab something to eat, grab a nap, get ready for the show, airport the next day at 4 a.m. And then that's it. And so, podcast, radio, and then maybe Wednesdays or Thursdays are light, but Thursdays usually like travel. So it's like, you got to be. That's why I don't understand. You see Kreischer and all these guys. He's on a bus.
That makes it
But
easier.
it's like I'm not drinking if I get back to my hotel at midnight and I got to get up in 4 hours. Like you gotta you'll just get sick. You'll just get run down. So it's like at the end of tours, like we did like a run in Florida and like in Key West, we like had a couple beers at the end before we like flew back in the afternoon the next day. So it's nice to have like, or Bill Burr is like a big cigar guy.
Right.
So I've only smoked like 8 cigars in my life, and I think 5 of them were bought by Bill Burr. Yeah. So like he was doing San Francisco, and me and Tom were there. So like, hey, let's meet up at the cigar bar, have a brandy and a cigar. Like that stuff is fun, but just the old days of like just the Ozzy Osbourne stuff isn't happening anymore. And I know JB is disappointed by that, but that
does Tom Papa bring bread on the road?
He does. He brings bread he started giving it to people. We might be able to get you some, Raylan.
I want to try this bread because I keep hearing about it. I love bread. I don't
He brought me a couple, but I've been part of that whole process because I'll be like, hey, you should make pretzels, or you should make this. But the funniest thing was when I think he made bread for Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan gave him elk sausages, that he shot.
Right.
And so JB, I don't know if you watched enough. I'm a very picky eater, so this is like a big leap for me to eat elk sausage. It's very, and the funny thing is,
how was it? I've never had elk sausage.
I had some kind of like meat sweats during the night, and I felt like I had like the spirit of the animal in me. Yeah. It was a very, it wasn't something I'm super comfortable with.
That feeling was enlightenment coming through you. It wasn't meat sweats. Becoming one with the animal.
But yeah, it's funny thing is like the only time I've ever eaten with Joe Rogan, we went to this place called Carney's with a couple of comics after the Comedy Store, and he ate like 3 hot dogs and like a chili hamburger. God. And I was like, I thought this guy's like in shit. It must be like the only time he ate that month or something like that, because we were all like Philly comics, and we only had like a hamburger, and this guy's like pounding. Yeah, so I guess he does everything like.
He also probably burns 7,000 calories a day. So
yeah,
he like ran home or something like up a hill.
It sounds like a meal that my 13-year-old boys eat.
Well, that's what comedians, especially like New York, it's like every comedian in New York has like some kind of health issue because all you do is eat pizza like before and after the show.
Bachelor food all the time.
Slice, yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for us to eat well on the road.
Yeah, pizza's the main go-to, right? In the middle of the night when there's nothing else open, it's just a cheese pizza is the easiest thing.
Yeah,
inoffensive and won't make you sick.
Yeah.
But
yeah. That is the other big thing, because you guys have probably done this and maybe Amy has the same problem. Our show will end probably like 10 o'clock. Which is when like every restaurant closes in most major cities.
Yes.
So you really like have to go out of your way to like set up where you're gonna eat.
Yep.
And so that becomes more priorities, like where we're gonna drink or anything like that. It's like we want good food that isn't like something I can put in my microwave.
Right.
And then a lot of times you still like Tom will just not eat, which is funny. I'll still get like some horrible thing like in the hotel lobby freezer. They'll have some kind of like some pizza or something horrible that I'll regret eating. But he's pretty healthy. So it's like, so usually we'll have like one good meal a day when you're doing these and the thing is like, these are great shows. So I love this schedule as opposed to like being at the same comedy club for 10 shows where like they're a quarter full and they're not coming to see you and that kind of stuff. Like I do really get eaten up by that a little bit. Like that's why I do love The Last Waltz, because it's like the band talking about, we've been on the road for 15 years, man. If I go 20, you don't even want to talk to me or something. I don't even want to be around. So I do have that number kind of ticking in my head of like, I've got to make this fun. So that's why, the international stuff started, because it's like, I want this to be an experience and I want to do shows and I want to find out like, what if I am what if I go to Germany and I'm like there, David Hasselhoff or something? Like, what if what if Ray Lynn went to like Sweden and you're like Taylor Swift in Sweden? You know what I mean? You never know where you're gonna hook on. But
I'm down. Let's do it.
Paul is Mr. Afghanistan.
Isn't that funny thought to have? But it is kind of funny. It's like, oh, I could be, because you think about, well, I do well in San Francisco. It's like, what about Guam? What if you're like,
and you could be, you always hear about certain bands going to like Brazil and they're like, there are 150,000 people there. And I'm like, that band? Really? It's pockets, timing and luck. And
cheap trick, right? That was that whole story. The mystique of going to Japan. I guess they opened for Queen when Queen was like gigantic. So even the fact that they were like associated with Queen, the record wasn't even out. And like the place, they did Budokan, and it was basically like one of those, did you ever see that video of like the improv? There's like a horrible like improv trick where they would go, like when you do like a bringer show in New York, this band played and like this improv group like kind of messed with them and pretended that they were like their biggest fans and like knew all the words to their songs and kind of like messed with them.
Sounds brutal.
And like this band like really thought like, hey, maybe we're catching on and like people know our songs, everything like that. It was like that was like cheap trick. Like the record hadn't come out and like people knew the words, and it was like the craziest thing because they didn't believe it, and like they couldn't even leave the hotel. They couldn't even like wave into the window or anything like that. So nuts.
Yeah, and I mean, not that it's one of my favorite bands ever, but they were bigger there than they were here. Oh yeah, I'm wearing a shirt at the time.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They were bigger there than they were here at the time,
I will say I get a little angry. I shouldn't be angry, but it was like I saw them at the Greek Theater opening for Pat Benatar, I think.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
But he's wearing like the Dream Police, and it's 6 o'clock in LA. It's still light out, and the place is like a third full, and they're playing like from Budokan, and I was upset for them. And it was kind of like, it was like the Christopherson thing. He's like, do you guys know who they are?
Yeah, they had to have come to terms with that by now in their career, because all of us musicians look at that rock band and like, it's one of the greatest rock and roll singers still alive. He's still singing like that.
Yeah.
They've got a mountain of songs and they're uber respected by their peers. They have to know. I don't know what's going on. And, it's not like they're a one-hit wonder or haven't done well. But by every right, they should be up there with Aerosmith and all those other great, huge American bands.
Totally.
And for some reason...
Are they not?
Not, well, to us, but not, maybe they've sold as many records, but just not in the consciousness.
They are.
But they also...
The fact that you can hire them for your birthday party, so that makes it seem like they're within reach. You know what I mean? Like, they're not... Yeah.
They're also kind of like that personally. Tom Peterson lives here in town. I've done some work with him. I've met him a couple of times, and they're from Rockford, Illinois. They're just normal dudes, and they don't seem eat up with the rock star anything. Maybe that's the problem. But hands down, one of my favorite bands of all time.
Yeah, who else do you guys like, Raylan? Like, are there people that like helped you out or toured with you, or that you guys wanted to be like? Or
I like a lot of different things, but mostly I listen to comedy podcasts.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. But you don't have like a music like, because I try to at least look at like whose career would I kind of want to have, or what.
My grandpa's?
Yeah.
That'd be a good start.
I mean, like, honestly, he's a big influence to me. My family's music is a big influence. I love Joan Jett. I love Loretta Lynn. I'm all over the board, I love the band feel. I don't want to be a solo artist, I want to have...
That's the one thing I do miss about comedy. Like, that's one of the reasons I do try to find, not try to find, but like for whatever reason, I'll click with people that they're really good and that I respect, obviously, and work hard. And so it is like a thing where I like to be surrounded by that, because it's like, if you're just surrounded by, the other people or hangers on, or there's people that want to open for you, I always am trying to like kind of like stretch myself a little bit instead of be the guy who thinks he's the funniest guy in the room and will just like I've been in Jerry Seinfeld's house talking comedy with him. Like that's amazing to me than like
No shit.
10 waitresses listening to my bombing story in Sacramento somewhere, you know what I mean? Like I always kind of wanted to like reach up. So I've gotten, I played piano with Dave Chappelle, like smoking cigars with Bill Burr. You listen a lot, and then my time for talking will come eventually,
But honestly, yeah, those kind of situations I've found myself in there. You're looking around going, I can't believe I'm actually having a conversation with whomever. That kind of keeps you going too. I mean, I don't think it's not really an ego blast. It's just like, wow, I've been working hard and look at the situation I've found myself in. Completely lucky, but here I'm talking to somebody who I almost idolize as a peer. And that's, it's cool when that happens on your journey at all.
Yeah, I mean, I got bumped on Letterman, and I went back to LA, and I was at the Comedy Store, like just the bar, hanging out, and I think Doug was talking about Henry Phillips, who's also a super funny dude, and he's in Silicon Valley. He's like buddies with Mike Judge, so like I'm talking to Henry, and he's like, I told him the bump story, and he tells Mike Judge like, yeah, he just got bumped on Letterman. And he's like, oh, that's crazy. And so Mike Judge is like talking to me about Letterman. And I'm like a huge fan, like I love Office Space and everything he's ever done. And he's doing Silicon Valley. He's like talking to me about how he's figuring out how to do the second season because the guy passed away. And it was kind of cool. And then Drew Carey comes over, and then Mike Judge is like, oh, hey, how are you doing? He's like, this is Paul. He just got bumped on Letterman. So like Mike Judge is introducing me to Drew Carey, and then Drew Carey is like, oh, what happened? I got bumped by Regis Philbin. And he's like, Regis Philbin. And Drew Carey had like a great story about getting bumped by Regis Philbin on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So it was like this crazy thing. And I was like feeling terrible when I got bumped. And like the other story is like Artie Lang took me out to dinner that night. I got bumped at like the nicest, like the Palm in New York City. And then now I'm like meeting Drew Carey and Mike Judge because I got bumped. So it's like those experiences are like super cool to me. And like, it's not like a star thing, but it's like, I watched these guys when I was like growing, like Beavis and Butthead. Come on. Like,
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool to meet the people that you grew up loving.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes it doesn't work out.
I don't want to meet them at all because I don't want them to ruin my, like a lot of times humans just can't live up to the expectations that we put on them as our favorite whatever, So there's just been a couple of times I've been disappointed.
Yeah, it's I try to give people a pass too if it's like not a conventional. Like, I'm sure when Willie gets done with the show and there's 9,000 people, like it is a special person that can handle that. Like I've seen,
he does sit there or he did before COVID and everything. He was signing autographs and meeting everyone after the shows.
I just mean like he says all the right stuff. Like, the people that are like so famous and they're so at peace with it. Like most people are not at peace with it at all. And they struggle with, he's just kind of like, I'm everybody's right now. So, I'm not, he tells those stories about like those people showing up at his farm saying they're his kids or something. I think he was on Howard Stern talking about all these stories about like people just showing up. Yeah, and Howard Stern's like, don't you get a gun? Aren't you freaked out? He's like, oh no, he's okay. It's just like, it's like, he's such a cool, I don't know. There's certain people that are kind of meant to handle that success. And I think he's definitely one of those.
One of them,
yeah, he's touched with it. He never fucks up because I don't think he has a publicist in his ear telling him what to say. So people like him.
Publicist is great.
Yeah.
But he also does say the right stuff. You know what I mean? Like when
that's what I mean. He's
not dodging it. He's just like,
he's the best at interviews too. I mean, the best. He answers a question and kind of, if he doesn't want to answer what they're trying to get out, he gives the best answer, and it's like he didn't even have to think about it or something. He's amazing. Right.
Yeah, it is. If you ever heard his Stern one, I forget. There was another one where I think it was his album. There's an album came out, or no, the book. He was doing something with Micah and Johnny Knoxville. They were like taking questions at Sirius, and he just wanted to tell a joke. Like every time, I think there's only like 10 or 15 people like listening to like this Q&A that
Yeah.
Johnny was doing with him, and then Willie's like, I got another joke, and he would just tell like a joke like like he loves jokes, right? Like he
Loves
loves
them, yeah.
comedy.
He
Dude,
loves to laugh.
all
Yeah.
those old school country guys have a million jokes. I can't imagine him sitting around because just old men that age have great jokes. And these
Oh.
guys, because I mean,
And actually, you're talking about the book that is the Dirty Joke book, probably, because he had a book that he put out that was called The Life of Willie Nelson and Other Dirty Jokes, and most of it was his jokes.
Oh, okay.
That might have been what he was promoting that day. Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm
well,
sorry to
it's just
interrupt you.
interesting that those guys, even on the Grand Ole Opry, humor was always a part of their
Yeah.
stage show. You know, they had bits, they told jokes, and
The ones that are funny, because there's definitely people that like, take advantage of that fact. But like, you talk about like John Prine, like
Oh yeah.
Blade John Prine, like he did Live from Here, which is like this it was kind of like the Prairie Home Companion, the new version of it.
right?
And they had like these, this super hip comic that was supposed to be hip, and then this like hip actor, and then John Prine is whatever age he was, and like instantly was the coolest guy in the room, like introducing his song before he even played. Everyone was like in love with him, and that's what Willie Nelson has. That's what like Joe Walsh has. That
I
you
love
can just
it.
say like a sentence, and like everyone is like, "Oh, this guy's the best." Just having that. Yeah, those guys are so funny.
I want to ask you just a couple more questions, and we'll let you go. What is your music you go to now, when you want to turn music on?
Man,
These days, like in the last couple of days. I won't make you pull up your Spotify and tell me, but like,
I do that cop out thing. I do love a little bit of everything, but I do more than I love music documentaries. I love
Yeah.
dynamics of bands,
he's obsessed with documentaries.
which I'm sure you guys like, because you talk about that is a funny thing that like you have to find this perfect, like like Willie had Paul, and it's like I think
Yeah.
Paul was like a pimp at a hotel or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it was like the strangest meeting ever, and he like played a box for like the first 5 years. He didn't know how to play the drums
No,
or
they
something.
taught him. They needed a drummer real fast, and they just kind of showed him how.
But he knew how to get the money at the end of the night.
and that was his job.
But he was
Paul
like a
was funny
great
guy,
hang.
so
It's
they
like this
died.
guy's so cool that we got to have him around somehow.
Yeah, he wore a cape.
And so that's what I mean. Oh, did he really? He just
How badass is that? A cape. Not Rick Wakeman, drummer for Willie Nelson.
The devil. They called
Man.
him the devil because he looked like it with his top hat and cape and cane. He looked like a pimp, kind of. Yeah, I mean,
He was.
Yeah, he was.
Supposedly in the at least in the book, Willie kind of makes it seem that way. He was
Yes,
in
it's the
that
truth.
business, but
But he was also the sweetest man ever.
well, obviously, because like, how do you pull a guy out of that surroundings, and like, you need to be with us, like in this thing that we're doing. It's kind of like, I'm not like a giant Grateful Dead person, but it does feel like that's the feel of like, you need to come with us. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that. Like, we have 4 drummers now, but we still want another one or something like that. But that must be like, I mean, that's the fun part. That's got to be amazing for Willie to like have the entire like family and like so many people around. That's got to be more home than like, it's how I feel, because when I travel, I probably hang out with more people than when I'm here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see that many friends because everybody else is traveling too. But when I go to these cities and see friends from high school or family or something like that, that's more fun for me, so that's got to be great for him.
Yeah, and he usually if he's getting out when he's traveling, he's either just riding his bike or golfing. He'll go golf around here for sure.
That's the place I go. I go to the Pedernales course in Austin or something like that. That's where he like
Icewood outside of Austin. Yeah.
Who was it when he wrote Poncho and Lefty, and Waylon like passed out on the course, and like Willie wrote like the whole album or something while he was like,
I don't know that story. I'm gonna have to ask.
yeah,
about that.
supposedly like Waylon just got drunk, and then Willie wrote the song and like woke him up to like record his whatever 2 lines or something.
That's so funny.
And then Waylon passed out again, and then like Willie and everybody finished the song and like shipped it off to whoever already. And then Waylon got up in the afternoon. He's like, "Hey, I want to re-record that stuff. He's like, it wasn't any good. He's like, it's already done.
Sorry.
He's like, sorry. And
Okay, last question. Since you've met all of us, other than Papa Willie, who's your favorite Nelson?
You don't have to answer.
favorite Nelson,
Yeah, that's
it's got to be Ray
right.
Lynn
Yeah.
and the band. Well, the band, right? Although Amy will get mad probably, but
Well, I just meant person, but yeah, you don't have to pick bands, just person.
okay,
I'm your
person,
favorite.
of course, yeah. And
Today, at least, for sure.
I do want to add something to this museum, though. This makes me. It's like I want to come up with some kind of fun idea. I don't know if I can come up with a cutout,
A bus.
and then
You should
people
bring a tour bus.
No, just of me, and then
Oh,
people
yeah.
will like wonder who it is, and they're like, you don't know Paul from Willie's thing, and then
You
there's
might
this weird
recognize him
thing.
from such things as the
You know what we
Music is
should
Funny
do?
podcast.
We should get 8x10s of all of you guys who've gone to come here, and then we'll just hang.
Oh, we
I'll
could
bring a
sneak 'em
hammer
up
and
in
nail,
here.
and we'll just sneak you guys up on the wall. I don't even.
Oh wait,
think
I
you'll
will
notice.
show you. I remembered to get this. So this is Doug. So when I first moved to LA, I moved to this beautiful place called Playa del Rey, which nobody really knows about. But the only person I ever met that lived there was Doug Stanhope. And Doug lived on the water. They called it Surfer or the Jungle. That's what they called it. This neighborhood is called the Jungle. So it was like the last bastion of like, there was like one street where it's just all surfers and these kind of like dingy bungalows. Everything else is like $1 million apartments. You know, like the guy who owns the Lakers lived there and stuff like that. And Doug lived in this neighborhood. And so when he was leaving LA, he had a yard sale. So I went down the street and I got his margarita glasses. So I still have one. I had one glass that made the trip. I don't know how many I had first, but I've moved a couple times since then. But yeah, he and then he moved to Bisbee, which I haven't been to Bisbee, but that sounds like you guys will be able to play some kind of concert there too.
Oh yeah, I'm
But,
definitely trying to stay in touch with him so we can go to
Play the
Bisbee.
concert for one. Yes. that we talked
And
to.
my other thing for the museum is, so I talk about ice cream a lot, and a guy I grew up with that I played Little League with. That's how small this town is. It opened an ice cream place in. JB's gonna judge me for this, but so I took tap dancing for 1 year, and he opened an ice cream place in the place that I took tap dancing for 1 year. It's called Ice Cream Works, and he named an ice cream flavor after me. It's called Paul Morrissey's Pale Dream, and it's orange creamsicle infused with vodka, which I didn't know they could do. Do you know
Oh
they
my
could put
That
booze in ice
sounds
cream?
tasty, actually.
An ice cream?
So I'm gonna, and it's delicious. So I'm going to try to get like some kind of pipeline of this like booze ice cream. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you can name one after you or something.
Wait a
like
minute.
That, but
You don't like coffee ice cream, but you like orange sickle vodka ice cream? This is crazy.
you don't think so? What you like a coffee ice cream?
Yeah, everyone but you likes coffee ice cream.
I don't believe that. I think
I don't like coffee ice
it's
cream.
all
You're just
coffee.
being controversial or not
Contrarian.
Thank you. That
Coffee
word. Words are hard.
addicts. Coffee addicts will eat anything with coffee in it because they think they're gonna get that rush, but they don't like that taste. I assure you.
Do you like egg ice cream?
You know who? You know has the most? Are you like a coffee addict or no?
I do like coffee, but I just like the coffee that I make at home with the Italian espresso maker. You know, I like that
You
one.
have to read this thing about Tom Petty. It
I
was like
read
a
that.
complete.
I
He's a
read it.
complete coffee addict, right?
Yeah.
But he was like a white trash. Like he would go to Waffle House, and he loved like that dirt coffee that they made in like the Waffle House big like coffee makers. And so I forget what he did. He got like
it was
one
a
of the.
place he was going, and he went and asked the cook or whoever was making the coffee, how do you make this? And he showed him that old shitty coffee maker.
And he bought the machine. He bought like this machine from like
But
Denny's.
Waffle House coffee is gross.
Yeah, but
Well,
not
it's like one of those. It not to him. He
No, it
liked
tastes
it
like
perfectly.
water.
But then he also hired he had like a private chef for like some event, and the private chef made the coffee, but did the exact measurements for like the coffee, and the coffee was like 10% better. And so like this was Tom Petty's quest, was like the perfect coffee. So if you came to his house, there was always like 2 pots ready and all that kind of stuff. And I love people that are that obsessed over like getting something mundane, like perfect like that. And I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
thought, so I think that's you because you're
Maybe.
you're very offended by the coffee ice cream thing. I don't even like. I went to when I was at Seinfeld's house. He asked if I wanted coffee. You know, he's like famous for coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I should have like my first one. You know, it's like, you know, smoking a joint with Willie or Dave Chappelle or something like that. It's like,
Right.
maybe I should just have coffee here. He's like, I wouldn't start with this stuff. I go, it would be like the funniest episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee ever when like Jerry calls me up and he's like, hey, you want to get coffee? And I was like, I don't drink coffee. All right, see you later. And then it's like, all right, we never do it.
Or you're just chattering a million miles an hour the whole time
After the first cup.
After your first cup, would
you know,
it might be great.
But he didn't drink it until he was in his 50s. Like Tom Papa's actually claims to be the one that got him into it because Tom is like,
I thought you were
ate
going to say
coffee.
Tom Papa didn't eat bread until his.
But here's how I know Tom is like a coffee addict is because I'm always like because I have trouble sleeping. I'm like a night owl, you know, and so I always do my best writing at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oh, okay.
And he's like this is his rationale is he goes to sleep early, and I'm like, why do you go to sleep early? He goes, because I know the first thing I'm doing when I get up is I get to have coffee.
Yeah.
That's how you know. And I've heard other people light up when I say that. And I was like, oh yeah, you're one of those people too.
That's the last thing I think about. I think when I go to sleep, like, oh, I get to have that coffee in the morning. Yeah.
Few hours.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Well, I've had you guys too long. I'm sure you have to to make more popcorn in there.
I just have to pee.
No, I thank you guys. I purposely
I'd love to keep
scheduled this during days that I didn't have like anything because I get that Zoom exhaustion and I wanted to have fun with you. And I have so many stories about your dad and Amy's been so cool and all this kind of stuff. So I thank you for making this connection and the JB.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, I love it. And good luck with your stuff. Like I think now everybody has kind of this creative spark a little bit. I mean, you started a podcast during a pandemic. That's pretty cool. Like you're putting your energy towards something cool. Like you never know what's gonna lead, you know?
Never know. I just wanted to talk to you guys, really.
It's a good excuse. You guys are trash, and it's a good excuse to get to meet some comedians that we love.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'll let you pee, but thank you so much, JB and Raylan. All right, we'll see you guys. Thanks so much.
Paul.
Bye.
All right, bye.
He's my favorite comedian.
I've heard that before. Yeah, he was great. I loved talking to Paul. It was a good time. Thanks for checking out the episode. Tune back in next Wednesday and every Wednesday for a brand new one. We got another great one coming up next week.
And hit that subscribe button and rate and review. Say nice things. Don't be an asshole.
Enjoy your groceries.
Free Britney.
I know your mama's name.